Chapter 30. Sorceress Edia. Galbadia Garden had been quiet even when it had been filled with students. There was just something about the place, it had the spirit of a library. Now that the soldiers had gutted it of the student population, it was downright eerie. Squall's boots echoed off of the walls as he and Rinoa stepped within. He didn't know exactly where the others would be. He was fully prepared to need to search for them. Irvine, however, was better at predicting where they would arrive than Squall would have given him credit for. Either that, or one or both of them was very lucky. The others were standing around in the front hall almost immediately inside the garden. At the sound of their footsteps, they turned quickly. Hands automatically went to weapons, but none were drawn. Instead, bright smiles broke everyone's faces at seeing Rinoa standing healthy and whole right beside Squall. "Rinoa!" Selfie beamed, running forward. They both laughed as the smaller girl caught her up in a large hug. "Are you all right?" Quistis asked, walking to her side quickly. She was smiling as well. She touched Rinoa's shoulder gently as Selfie pushed back, tears swimming in her eyes. "I'm fine. Really," Rinoa promised them. Her hands only felt sore now. "You're all right." Zell seemed to deflate with relief as he sank to the ground. The guilt that had been slowly eating him alive finally ebbed. He had failed Squall by not protecting her. But she was alive now. And Zell swore to himself that he was never going to mess up like that again. Irvine grinned as he stepped up to Squall. Despite the hugs the girls were giving each other, he hadn't stepped back to give them room. Nor had Rinoa stepped away from him. Neither of them really even noticed. But the others did. And that simple non-move spoke volumes. "Nice work," Irvine punched Squall's shoulder gently. "I didn't doubt you for a second." "Thank you, Irvine." "Wah!" Irvine turned quickly, but Squall was looking back at Rinoa. The words were soft-spoken, so quick that one might have missed them. Irvine almost had. But that was definitely gratitude that had just come from Squall. He found himself grinning as Rinoa turned back to Squall and smiled. The two of them did nothing more than share a look, but it was still somehow so very intimate and familiar. Not like the others were intruding. More like the others weren't even there. Damn, if this were a better time, Irvine would be working to get the others away to give them some privacy. "The sorceress should be here somewhere," he said regretfully, pointing over his shoulder. "We're way far in the back. Mostly just dorm rooms around here. The classrooms are a bit further forward. Though I doubt she's hanging out somewhere common like that." Selfie stepped back, grinning at Irvine. "You know, somehow, I can't see you here. Quiet, obedient. In uniform." "Yeah, I got a lot of demerits. To tell you the truth, they were a little eager to be rid of me. I didn't even get a choice in the mission to join you guys. I was just told I was going. Gonna be honest. I'm not all that disappointed in the outcome." "Well, you know we're happy with it," Selfie told him, beaming. "Without you, we never would have found out about." She paused, her voice trailing off. They never would have found out about each other. Or Matron. The air got heavy around them. It had been all battles and fast paces to get here. Now that they were here though, in the tomb-like silence of the garden, the weight of what they were doing was pulling down on them. But there was no turning back now. "Forget about the past,"
Squall ordered them, his voice hard. Necessarily so. No matter how it weighed on him, those fuzzy memories of the kind woman who raised them, he couldn't allow that to distract him from the mission.
She's our enemy now,
he continued, looking between them all. Pausing for a moment on each face as he came to it. Hoping to impress upon them the importance of what they were doing. Not just for Seed, but for the world.
Don't think twice for a second. There's no way we can fight her like that. I, for one, can't. She chose to fight and become our enemy. We chose to fight back. We have no choice. At least, I'd like to think so.
It would make it easier. Squall trailed off, unsure what to say. Everyone was looking at him, their faces blank. Like they had no idea what he was talking about. Like he was the only one that was confused. Or maybe he was just feeling that way. He shook his head, banishing the words.
We've come this far. I guess there's no need for me to say anything.
The soft touch of Rinoa's hand against his caught his attention. She didn't quite grab and hold his hand, but her finger wrapped just slightly around his. She smiled at him encouragingly.
We're still listening. Squall, we want to know how you feel.
I want to know how you feel. She didn't say it. But Squall heard it all the same. He saw it in the way her eyes beseeched him for more. She was always asking for more. And, though it was constantly hurting him to do so, he was always eager to give her more. A slave to those brown eyes. His jaw set.
I'll tell you later.
Rinoa's mouth opened slightly in surprise at the intensity of the words. Promising her much more than she was asking for at this moment.
After we get out of this,
he vowed. His finger twitched. Not quite holding her back, but acknowledging her hold on him all the same. He turned to face the others, none of whom had missed the subtle exchange. His eyes were hard, Commander Leonhard back in place.
Irvine, this is your garden. Lead the way. We'll follow you. You got it.
Irvine tipped his hat to him.
The entrance to the main garden is locked, so we've been looking for any lost keycards. We've already checked the doors on this floor. They're all locked. So let's head on up to the second. See what we see.
Falling into formation, everyone stepped after Irvine as he started up towards the stairs. It was Squall's first instinct to try to keep quiet, but no one else was making a similar attempt. Selfie explained that, since they came inside, they hadn't seen anyone. Every soldier had rushed outside to join the battle. The students were either missing or hiding. And they were trying to find to the sorceress, so if she found them that would just save them time.
I think my dorm is down that way,
Irvine muttered, as he grabbed the railing on the stairs.
I can't say I miss it. Every room in this place is so bland and grey. You guys at Balam have it good. You wanna see bland?
Rinoa raised an eyebrow.
Remind me to show you some pictures from my academy later. You didn't go to military school, right, Rinoa?
Selfie asked as they topped the steps.
Yeah. But Caraway picked a private school that was so regulated that I might as well have.
They stepped out of the stairwell and everyone froze. Fujin and Raijin looked up from where they were standing on either side of the opening. Cypher's followers looked at them. Squall's fingers were already grabbing his gun blade, but neither of them made any move to return the gesture. There was no fight in their gaze. They just kind of looked at him, frowning.
Hey Fujin! Raijin!
Zell frowned, looking between them, confused.
What's up?
Rajan's shoulders fell a bit as Fujin let out a sigh.
Fatigued. You're not fighting?
Quistis asked, looking between them.
Don't really want to, you know.
Rajan made a face.
Just wanna get this over with, you know. What's with you two?
Squall asked, looking between them.
Where's Cypher?
Fujin and Rajan shared a long look. The gray-haired girl spoke first.
Request. Yeah,
Rajan nodded, looking at Squall.
We're leaving Cypher up to you now, you know? We don't even know what's going on anymore, you know. What's wrong?
Rinoa asked, feeling pity for these two. While she had never met Cypher's friends, he had talked about them during their summer together. Rajan slumped over, like he was already defeated.
We just want the old Cypher back, you know? He just ain't the same anymore. Like he's not even Cypher. Sorceress. Yeah. Don't know what she did to him, but he's different, you know? Sleeps all the time until she starts pulling on his strings. He lookin' really crazy lately. We're worried, you know? Feels like we're losing him.
Squall crossed his arms, looking off down the halls of the garden, as if he might be able to see Cypher through the walls. At this point, Squall didn't know if Cypher was even capable of turning back. If he wasn't so lost to the sorceress's machinations, then he was lost to his own mind. Trapped in this dream of his own making. He couldn't really blame Fujin or Rajan for feeling like they had lost him. At this point, Squall could barely see anything left of his old training partner in this Cypher.
All right,
he nodded to their request.
Leave him to me. Suppose it would be too much to ask you not to kill him.
Rajan looked at him, his eyes hurting.
I'll do my best,
was all Squall would promise. Though his fingers were itching to bury his punishment deep into his chest so he could watch the light leave his eyes. That was the hatred talking. Seed did not teach to find enjoyment in killing. It was a purely clinical affair meant to be as quick as possible. Cypher was the one who was wrong for seeking to derive pleasure from the pain of others. Squall had to resist the urge to be like him. Rajan nodded and he pointed down the hall.
There's some students hiding out in the rooms. I hear they got keycards so they can move about without being found. If you're looking for a way into the garden, that's your best shot.
Squall nodded to him.
Thanks. Sorry.
Rajan shook his hand, refusing to watch as Squall led the others away.
You sure about letting those two go?
Zell asked under his breath.
They're no threat to us as they are. Let's split up,
Irvine suggested.
This hall goes in a circle. Send half of us that way to check the rooms, then you take the other half that way.
Squall nodded.
All right. Irvine, take Quistis and Selfie. Zell, Rinoa, and I will go this way. We'll meet back by the staircase once you've checked all the rooms.
They nodded to him and everyone split to follow their halls. Squall led his team back across the staircase and down the hall. Rinoa stayed close to his side, frowning at the defeated faces of Fujin and Rajan.
I feel like I know how they feel,
she murmured sadly.
Will that be a problem if you have to fight him?
Squall asked. He needed to know. If she couldn't handle a battle, then he would need to make sure she didn't find herself in that battle. As the leader, that was part of his duty. She shook her head, giving him a small smile.
I'm fine. I can fight as long as I'm not alone. I won't be alone, right? Of course not.
He wasn't leaving her side for a second in the heart of enemy territory. It only took 2 rooms before they found a student. Hiding inside the bunk in one of the dorms, he jumped when the door slid open and Squall stepped in. He cried immediately, covering his head with his hands.
Please don't kill me.
Squall frowned. It hadn't even crossed his mind.
I'm not fighting. See? No weapons. See?
He held out his hands in demonstration.
You're Seed, right? I'm not your enemy. Promise. Okay,
Squall said simply, staring at him, making him more uncomfortable.
No, seriously,
the student groaned, looking to Rinoa as she stepped in behind him.
Look, those bastards stormed in during class and just took over the place. I want nothing to do with this. Okay,
Squall frowned. What hadn't he understood about the first answer?
Where is everyone?
Rinoa asked gently.
Most of the students were kicked out,
the guy explained, unfolding himself from his bunk.
They only kept guys like me to keep the place up and running and clean because they didn't want to have to do any dirty work. You poor thing,
Rinoa said sympathetically.
You guys are here to fight the sorceress, right?
The student looked between the two of them and Zell, who was still standing out in the hall.
To kick her out? Here. Take this.
He pulled from the pocket of his uniform a white, plastic card. Squall reached out and took it, causing the guy to flinch, annoying Squall in the process. He hadn't made a threatening gesture towards him, why was he acting so jumpy?
That's a level 1 keycard,
the guy explained, backing up into his bunk again.
It will unlock any door on the first level. Which keycard will get me into the garden itself?
Squall asked immediately.
You need a level 2 to open the main door, but a level 3 to get to the 3rd floor where the sorceress is staying. There are 2 other students with keycards hiding out. They told us to scram when the battle started and we all bailed so we wouldn't get killed. Please, man, I don't want to die. Don't lift a weapon to a Seed and you won't,
Squall promised calmly.
Keep hiding out here and my men probably won't even find you. We don't care about you. We're more concerned with the soldiers. Your men.
The student frowned.
Yo, Commander,
Zell spoke up immediately, grinning. Squall turned with a frown. What was with the formality?
Yeah. The others are already back. Let's go. See, Commander.
The student squeaked, trying to hide in his jacket.
Zell.
Rinoa frowned, walking from the room. She hit his arm as she passed.
Why did you do that? You trying to give the kid a heart attack? Trying to make him wet his pants, actually,
Zell chuckled as Squall stepped out and the door sealed behind them.
Did you see the look on his face? I think you took 10 years off his life, Squall. What are you talking about?
He asked, irritated, completely unaware of the intimidating affect of his own presence. Zell was laughing and Rinoa was shaking her head as they joined up with the others. Irvine's group hadn't found anything, but Squall held up his prize.
A level 1?
Irvine asked, taking it.
Sweet. This will open the doors downstairs. We can get across to the whole floor. Come on. Get across what?
Squall asked, following him back down the steps. The double doors Irvine unlocked let out a blast of cold air when they slid open. They all walked inside to find themselves standing at the edge of an ice rink.
"What is this?"
Squall asked as Irvine snickered.
"We are the Fighting Grendels. Go team!"
Laughing, Irvine pointed across the ice to a door on the far side.
"That will take us to the other half of the garden, where the door we need is. So, the question is, who will make it to the other side first?" "That's not the question,"
Selfie grinned at him.
"The question is what the winner gets for making it to the other side first." 7 minutes in heaven,"
he suggested, wiggling his eyebrows.
"We hardly have time for games,"
Quistis told them primly, moving to the edge.
"Let's just go."
She made it about 3 steps onto the slick ice before her boots started sliding out from under her. She barely caught herself before face-planting, finding herself instead standing at a rather awkward angle, both arms held aloft to keep her balance. Selfie was laughing, Irvine was grinning.
"My turn!"
Zell yelled, taking the entrance at a sprint. His sneakers hit the ice and he started sliding on his own momentum. He didn't make it very far past Quistis before he toppled forward. His body continued along the ground, coming to a halt about halfway to the center line.
"Beat that!"
he urged, throwing his fist into the air.
"That's nothing,"
Selfie snickered, stretching her arms.
"Stand back, amateurs. Let a real Trabian show you how it's done." "What is happening right now?"
Squall asked, his arms crossed as Irvine and Selfie both took to the ice. She was doing pretty well until Irvine pushed her over. He was trying, and failing, to run to the other side. His boots slipping on the ground meant he went exactly nowhere. Quistis was trying to walk, but she was making only a little progress. Still standing by Squall's side, Rinoa was giggling into her hand.
"Why didn't they just go around the rink?"
Squall pointed out obviously.
"Don't be such a party pooper,"
Rinoa laughed, nudging him.
"Come on. First one across wins, right?"
Squall gave her a look that she ignored. She continued past him. She put her boot onto the ice gently, already grinning as she took hold of the rail around the ring for balance. Squall rolled his eyes and came forward after them. He stepped onto the rink confidently. He reached out and took Rinoa by the arm. She flailed for a second before grabbing into his hand in return. Then she watched as he strode across the ice like it was concrete, dragging her along behind him.
"Hey!"
Selfie blinked at him, confused as she continued to skate on her boots.
"Hey!"
Irvine pointed to him from the ground where he had fallen on his behind.
"Cheater! You don't get to use Shiva's powers."
Rinoa was laughing. She eased up her grip on him so she fell behind further. It was almost like they were dancing across the ice. Or at least, it felt like it to her. The ice, so slick to everyone else, was stable and familiar to him. He was just as graceful on the slippery surface as he was anywhere else. Any ice that might have melted under the pressure of his boots refroze immediately because of Shiva's presence. Meaning he always had a dry, sturdy platform to push off from. Squall stepped from the rink first. He pulled Rinoa right after him. They turned back to see the others had made it across the center line and were trying to rush for third place.
"So I guess that means you win,"
Rinoa laughed, leaning against the rail while they waited.
"You get 7 minutes in heaven." "What does that even mean?"
Squall looked at her, baffled at this whole competition thing.
"Oh,"
she laughed deviously.
I can't wait to show you.
Squall blinked at the way Rinoa ran her fingers slowly up her belly, across her chest, in the pretext of playing with the rings around her necklace. Drawing his focus, once again, to her breasts. He didn't know what 7 minutes in heaven was, he was starting to get an idea.
You sure 7 minutes is enough?
He asked without thinking. Rinoa gasped, a smile breaking out across her face. Squall realized what he said too late and turned his face away. The damage was done, and Rinoa was smiling at him seductively, her tiny pink tongue darting out to caress her own lips. Squall was staring determinedly out at the others, trying to force his body to be calm. Since he started using Blizzara, the cold was not doing it for him anymore. He had to start running mental drills in order to take his mind away from the thoughts they had turned to.
By the way,
Rinoa whispered, stepping in closer to him.
No, 7 minutes is not nearly long enough.
She had put one of her nimble fingers on his chest. She was slowly stroking it downwards. Out of sight behind the railing of the rink. She left behind a curious burning sensation where her finger had been, and Squall was busy mentally running down monster statistics to keep himself calm.
Yes.
Zell landed on the edge of the ring. He threw up his hands in victory.
That's what I'm talking about. See that, you losers.
Zell. Selfie stepped up behind him, her boots splashing in the rink.
It doesn't count when you get across by melting the ice. Seriously,
Irvine gave him a look.
You're a worse cheater than he is. You're just jealous because I won,
Zell told them, sticking his nose in the air.
Technically, Squall won,
Quistis pointed to their leader.
Yeah,
Irvine grinned.
Rinoa, make sure you give him the most out of those 7 minutes. Why stop at 7?
She asked, grinning.
Aren't we here for a reason?
Squall asked over their knowing grins.
Can we focus? Absolutely,
Rinoa nodded, trying and failing to be serious.
Irvine, get your mind out of the gutter.
Still grinning salaciously, Irvine led them to the door out of the rink. The others stepped out as well, shaking the cold from their bodies. Squall looked around as Irvine made his way to the double doors across from the rink exit.
All right, we'll start here and work our way down. You three take that side of the hall, we'll take this one. Keep your eyes out for the remaining students. Found one.
Irvine said immediately, pointing into the doors he had just opened as a cry of surprise and fear escaped from within. Frowning, Squall stepped forward and walked with him into an auditorium-like classroom. There was a podium for the teacher to speak at, and rows of desks for the students. It was small, but still lacked the intimacy of the classrooms at VIII. Hiding behind the podium, another male student was poking his head out cautiously to look at them. He looked about as scared as the last one. Then he frowned.
Irvine? Is that you? Hey,
Irvine grinned.
Long time. How you been? Bad.
The student stood up slowly.
Are you with the G Army now? Nah. I'm in the seed program at VIII.
He pointed over his shoulder to the others.
This is my commander. We're breaking in to take out the sorceress. Seriously?
A look of relief came over his face.
Oh, man. Yes. That would be awesome. You're the seed commander? Yo, so nice to meet you, man. Do you have a keycard?
Squall asked, getting straight to the point.
Oh, Yeah. Here.
He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a card.
That's for level 2. I need level 3,
Squall grumbled, taking the card nonetheless.
Yeah, then you need level 2. Bree has level 3 and she asked me to lock her behind level 2 so people couldn't get to her. I said yes because, honestly, I'm trying to get some. Anyway, she's hiding out in classroom 4B. You remember where that was, Irvine? Oh, yeah. No problem.
He smirked.
Thanks. No, man, thank you,
the student said sincerely.
We don't stand a chance against those guys. I never wanted to join the G Army, and now I'm starting to think that I don't want to join any army. All this violence stuff is too much. Please, Commander, you're the last hope we have.
Squall nodded, accepting his words, though not liking very much the weight he was putting on him in saying them. He walked out as Irvine bid his old friend goodbye. He walked out after Squall and held out his hand for the new card.
So where's classroom 4B?
Squall asked. Irvine frowned.
Actually, it's all the way on the other side of the garden. We need to get across the main hall. Can we get there with level 2? Oh yeah. 3 unlocks the upper floors for teachers and the headmaster. Which is where I would be if I was a sorceress. It's a bit of a walk though. And, when I say it's possible to get there. Well. It is, isn't it?
Squall asked.
Technically. If you don't mind a bit of a jump.
Irvine grinned. Squall frowned, confused. Up on the 3rd floor, through a small door, Irvine led them to a balcony overlooking the outdoor recreation areas that wrapped around the garden offices.
What is this?
Squall asked, looking down over the rail.
It's the only way into the garden without a level 3,
Irvine shrugged.
We have to jump. But, we'll have access to the main garden through there. And those doors aren't keycard locked, so that's good, right? Irvine, let's discuss what the word possible means.
Rinoa gave him a look.
Forget it.
Squall stepped back.
Let's just get this over with. Yes.
Selfie laughed. She and Squall took the jump at the same moment, both of them leaping neatly over the low railing and falling down over 15 feet to the ground below. Squall landed gracefully. Selfie had to take a few steps to keep her balance. Neither of them fell. Squall turned and looked back at the others. He nodded.
Man.
Zell made a face as Quistis took the jump. She landed elegantly, lowering nearly to her knees before standing up calmly.
Not so bad,
she smiled, straightening her skirt.
Frickin' hell!
Zell yelled, throwing himself over the side. He landed hard, falling down to his hands and knees. But he got back up again no problem.
Need some help?
Irvine asked Rinoa as she hesitated by the edge.
I got this,
she said uncertainly. Squall was looking up at her. Waiting. She was reminded fiercely of how he looked, waiting for her to jump across trains to join him. He wasn't going to help her unless she needed it. He was going to allow her to do it herself. That gave her the confidence to put her hand on the rail and vault herself over. Her stomach fell out as the ground rushed up towards her. Even as her mind panicked, her body was well trained. She hit the ground and her knees absorbed the shock, lowering her gently down. She heard Irvine land a moment after her and she pushed herself up. Her legs felt watery, but she had made the jump on her own. She beamed at Squall and he nodded. It felt like the highest praise she had ever received.
This way,
Irvine pointed forward to the double glass doors. The others followed after him, jogging inside. Through the doors, down a long hallway. Past doors that led into dark offices. Some of which had apparently been gutted by the less than respectful guests that had taken over the garden. Then suddenly...
Hey!
Zell frowned as they jogged past a staircase.
I know this place. This is where you made me do over 300 push-ups.
Squall returned his glare with an even glance.
You mean the place where I caught you peeking up women's skirts? You were doing what?
Quistis asked, Rinoa and Selfie joining her in giving him looks.
He
laughed self-consciously.
Must be mistaken. The classroom is just through the lobby,
Irvine told them, pointing ahead.
We just turn left up here at the... Whoa!
Squall stopped beside Irvine. His breath of surprise echoed out loudly in the large lobby. The massive beast that had been curled up in the center of the room lifted one of its 3 large heads and looked over to them. Languidly, like it didn't even care, the 3-headed, gray and red-scaled creature got to its feet and looked at them through eyes half closed with sleep.
AGF!
Zell gasped in surprise.
Galbadia Garden doesn't use GF,
Quistis frowned.
Do they, Irvine? No way,
he frowned, trying to work out the creature.
What's it even doing here? Who cares?
Squall shrugged.
Let's just take it.
A low, rumbling laugh echoed from the beast. Not because of the acoustics of the room but because the laughter was coming from all 3 of the GF's throats simultaneously.
Pretty confident,
the 3 voices said in unison, amused at him.
Let's see how you do. Irvine, you take Zell and Selfie for backup. Find that last keycard.
Squall ordered.
Rinoa, Quistis, you 2 help me take it down. Yes, sir.
Irvine led the other 2 off. Quistis and Rinoa stepped forward. The former's whip unraveled to the floor. The bright red body of the red scorpion was tipped by a shining bronze end. Stronger, by far, than her last weapon. It hung heavy but incredibly flexible in her hand. Next to her, Rinoa's rising sun unfolded itself from her blaster. She took aim at the GF as Squall drew his punishment from its sheath. The GF was grinning at them through 3 large mouths, each one filled with long, needle-sharp fangs.
Quistis, muzzle it,
Squall ordered her softly. The GF charged before she could. 2 mouths snarling, 1 mouth roaring, the dog beast GF was fast. Its large tail whipped around as it dove towards them. All 3 jumped out of the way. Quistis landed on her hand, throwing herself back onto her feet and whipping her scorpion forward. Rinoa slid to a halt, grabbing the ground to keep herself balanced while Squall landed back on his feet beside her.
Quetzalcoatl, Thundara on my whip!
Quistis ordered, jerking her weapon around again. The tail of it hooked onto the far mouth of the GF. She yanked back on it, throwing it off course and sending its body down. She tightened her hand as lightning erupted from the hilt of her scorpion and traveled down the body. The bright flash of lightning was accompanied by a small boom of thunder. The GF's body tightened in response as the energy flowed through him. However, when he looked back down at them, its 3 mouths were snarling in amusement. The middle head reached out and bit the body of the whip. Jerking to the side, it lifted Quistis clear off her feet and threw her to the floor. Grunting in pain, Quistis rolled out of the way just in time to avoid being crushed under the large silver claws on its front paws.
What just happened?
Rinoa asked, confused.
It absorbed the lightning,
Squall responded, his mouth tight.
We made it stronger. They can do that?
Rinoa gasped, taken aback.
Monsters with particularly strong affinities can. More than just being immune, like I am to the cold, they can actively absorb the energy of their affinities. Crud. So what do we do?
Rinoa asked as the large GF turned 2 of its heads towards them.
We defeat it the old-fashioned way. Rinoa, find a weak spot in its scales. Quistis, you all right? Of course I am,
the blonde growled, pushing herself up onto her feet. Her whip was gone now, laying sad and limp on the ground behind the GF.
Ease up on your magic. But wrap it up. On it,
Quistis said, edging to the side. One of the heads tracked her movement, the others kept their eyes on Rinoa and Squall. It had the unquestioned advantage of sight. There would be no surprising this one from behind or ducking into a blind spot. They couldn't even separate to focus its attention on one of them. They would just need to fight.
Blizzara!
Squall yelled, aiming for its 3 heads. The spears of ice that began erupting around the GF had it moving erratically, trying to avoid them. Not just trying, succeeding. It was fast, agile and athletic. The ice that Squall summoned kept hitting around its body, none of them landing. However, he bought enough time for Quistis to return to her weapon. She scooped it up as she ran past and turned quickly, bringing it around. The snapping of the bladed tip hit the GF's side. It roared in pain but didn't stop moving. Rinoa took aim as Squall and Quistis worked together to lead the GF back around into range. Her eye followed it around, her arm moving to just ahead of it. Accounting for the angle. The speed. Now. Her sun shot like a bullet, whizzing through the air. Up and around. The GF ran into its path as it was coming back. The dark red circular blade crashed into one of its heads, taking out the eyes. All 3 heads roared in shared pain as its body hit the ground. Blood was leaking from one of the faces, but the other 2 could still glare hatefully at her as she caught her edge. Growling, the GF began charging at her. Rinoa turned to run out of the way. Squall moved between them to defend her. Quistis's whip shot out and wrapped around the middle neck. She jerked back suddenly against its charge, digging the tip of her blade into its throat. Making a choking sound, the GF was pulled backwards, landing on its side.
Blizzard!
Squall's ice encased the GF's body. Roaring from the uninjured head, the GF thrashed about against the hold of the ice. Squall frowned as he focused on keeping the magic intact.
Dark Messenger!
Rinoa yelled, her eyes burning red as she pulled the GF into the inescapable grip of gravity. It crushed down on him. The ice groaned under the pressure. The GF chuckled, immune.
Are you serious?
She gasped, stepping back. Squall! Growling, Squall thought quickly. It broke his focus and he lost control over his ice. The GF shattered it into pieces and, shaking the shards from his armored hide, got back to his feet. The red of Quistis's whip was still around his neck. The head that could still see reached back and took it in its teeth and jerked. Crying out, Quistis was yanked forward. She didn't release her whip and she ended up crashing into the flank of the GF. His scales cut into her cheek, but she gritted her teeth and refused to release her whip. It loosened around the GF's neck, but as it was pulling it off, Quistis was vaulting up onto its back and shimmying up to the base of its necks. Pulling back her arm, she threw her whip around the necks of all three heads. Starting in surprise, the GF jerked back. Quistis took hold of the end of her whip as it came back around, creating a sort of rein for the GF. It began bucking, trying to dislodge her. Her hands tightened on the whip as her legs clenched against its shoulder blades to keep herself in place. Squall! Rinoa moved closer to him, her hand on the trigger of her blaster. She hesitated to shoot though for fear of accidentally hitting Quistis. The same reason that Squall was now keeping his magic to himself. Hold, he ordered her, his eyes following Quistis's movements.
Get ready to help if he throws her.
The GF's bucking was falling into a pattern. As it threw its body around, Quistis's head and torso were jerked all over, but she remained seated. Gripping the ends of the whip, she yanked them together. Doing so pulled the three heads of the GF closer together, knocking their skulls against one another. It strained the three necks and threw off of his balance. On the next buck, the GF crashed down to his side. Quistis barely jumped free in time to avoid having her leg pinned against the ground. She landed, rolled, and came up again, pulling on her whip and tightening it around its face.
Blizzara!
Another ice case covered the GF. Growling, it tried again to free itself. With its heads pinned to the ground though, it made very little progress. Squall was able to focus better now, keeping it locked in place, as Rinoa came forward slowly.
Do you yield?
Quistis asked, breathing hard. The GF struggled again for a minute more, but it wasn't going anywhere. He finally relaxed down, breathing hard through its three muzzles. Its eyes lit up with amusement.
You're good,
he praised.
I will join you. You may call me Cerberus.
He disappeared into a flash of blue and pink lights that rushed Quistis's chest. Her immediate protest at his joining was lost as her whip fell, limp, to the floor. She could feel Cerberus rushing up her nerves and into her head where both Quetzalcoatl and Pandemona were resting. She heard him growl in greeting as the two other GFs felt him curiously. She flinched, ready for a bad reaction between them. Cerberus laid down just behind her eyes, opposite of Quetzalcoatl and Pandemona. There was no immediate rejection from any of them. It was tense for a moment as her head became crowded, but no one was yelling yet.
Cerberus?
Rinoa asked, smiling.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. Oh, thanks,
Quistis smiled, standing.
I didn't know I could hold 3 GF.
Rinoa grinned as Squall stepped to her side, his eyes melting.
Are you hurt?
He asked calmly, sheathing his blade.
I'm all right,
she promised, jerking her whip back into her hands. She was hanging it back onto her belt when running footsteps announced the return of the others from the far classroom. Grinning in front, Irvine held another keycard in his hand. The three of them stopped in front of each other.
How did it go?
Selfie asked, looking between them to see who had a new GF.
He's mine now,
Quistis smiled.
3 GF?
Zell asked, leaning back onto one foot.
How is it that you both have 3, Irvine has 2, and the rest of us only have one. Well, I know why Squall and I only have one,
Rinoa smiled.
She was possessive and I'm still a GF beginner. What's your excuse, Zell? Shut up,
he grumbled, crossing his arms. The others laughed at him as Irvine passed Squall the new keycard.
That should get us onto the executive elevator, he explained. The girl says that the sorceress's room is on the very top floor. I'm sure you're absolutely shocked.
Perfect, Squall nodded, slipping it into his jacket pocket.
Are you all ready?
His eyes moved around, checking everyone's faces. They were all varying degrees of determined and accepting. Matron. The woman who raised them. Their headmaster's wife. She who was, essentially, their mother. They were ready to kill her.
Let's go.
All of the rush and urgency was suddenly gone as they returned to the central hall and made their way up the stairs. They passed the door to the waiting room where they had once mistakenly mourned the death of Cypher. Actually, considering him now, perhaps it wasn't a mistake at all. The elaborately designed elevator doors were somehow menacing. Squall waved the keycard in front of the scanner. It beeped and the doors slid open with a soft swish. The interior was professional, simple, and even more menacing than the doors. Squall moved first, stepping over the threshold as he put the keycard away. Rinoa was just a step behind him. Slowly, the others filed in after them. The doors shut behind them and hands went to weapons as the anticipation built. Selfie pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator jerked slightly then began quickly rising up through the floors. Rinoa had to bite back bile of nervousness. Squall, she whispered softly, looking to him. Squall was already looking at her. His eyes burning. She trembled slightly under that gaze. It did nothing to ease the anticipation. If anything, it only made it worse. After this was over, the doors slid open and a soft, sweet perfume filled the air. Squall stepped out first and began walking forward into what had once been the headmaster's office. It had been drastically changed since the sorceress had taken over. Lounging back in a seat made of airy drapes that cradled her body impossibly, Sorceress Edia's eyes were closed. She almost looked like she was sleeping. She took up the entire dais so that her knight had to stand on the first step leading up. Grinning at them, Cypher's hand was already on his Hyperion's hilt. As Squall and the others stepped into the room, he looked almost happy.
Oh, you guys shouldn't have,
he said in a honeyed voice.
I was gonna come visit you in my old home.
Shut up, Squall growled, pulling his punishment out again. Cypher. That damn smug smile. Squall could feel his hands shaking with the desire to run his old training partner through. Hatred, anger, the unquenchable desire for vengeance ran like ice through his veins. The room got colder as his anger deepened. Cypher pouted playfully.
Did you guys come all the way here just to fight our matron? After all she's done for us.
No one responded as they lined up in front of him. Irvine, Selfie, Zell, Squall, Rinoa, Quistis. All in a row, hands to their weapons. Zell's jaw tightened. Selfie took a deep breath as Irvine leveled his gun at Cypher's throat. Quistis's gaze was hard. Squall and Rinoa stood tall, watching him without a hint of hesitation in their expression. Cypher's gaze moved down the line then paused on Zell.
Hey, Chicken Wuss,
he greeted like it was an old, funny nickname between them.
A lot has happened between us through the years, eh? Yeah,
Zell growled, tightening his gloves.
I'm dying to get even.
Cypher tried again.
Instructor Treep. I'm still one of your dearest students, aren't I? Not anymore,
she assured him. Cypher shook his head as though disappointed. When he looked up again, his eyes fell on Irvine and he frowned at the sight of him.
Hey, you're a Galbadian student. Get over here. Nah.
Irvine shrugged almost carelessly.
I'm happy right here, thank you. Selfie, right.
Cypher looked right next to Irvine.
I wish we had more time to get to know each other. Nah,
she said in much the same way Irvine had.
You're not my type.
Cypher frowned as he finally looked to Squall. More importantly, to the girl standing next to him. A little too close to him. He knew that Rinoa was with them, he had been dully informed. However, it was the first time he had seen her with the others.
Why was she that close to Squall? Rinoa, what are you doing here?
He asked. A tingle of emotion came to life deep within his heart, but it was quickly snuffed out. He grinned charmingly.
You're gonna fight me, too? Come on. Remember a year ago we... Stop it.
She snapped. She refused to let him taint those happy memories she had of it. She was going to remember the confident, happy Cypher that had been his own man. She wouldn't allow this new, puppet Cypher to touch those memories.
It's too late, Cypher,
Squall growled, stepping in front of Rinoa slightly. Not really defending her, but wordlessly laying his claim over her.
You can't mess with our minds. To us, you're just another enemy. Like one of those monsters. You're comparing me to one of them.
Cypher growled, insulted beyond words to be put on the same level as such a common thing as a monster.
I ain't no monster. I'm the sorceress's knight. And look at you. Attacking like a swarm. You guys are the monsters.
A difference in opinion. Two sides that believed two different things. Could Squall say that he was any less evil than Cypher? It didn't really matter. He was obeying orders. Obeying his own heart that urged him to make Cypher pay for everything he had done to him. Cypher stepped down from the dais and the two men glared at each other. Rinoa took a step forward but stopped. The Gunblade Masters were completely focused. She almost felt like she was walking into a place that she didn't belong. She would fight Cypher if she had to, she knew that about herself. But it wasn't her right to do so. This was Squall's fight. Facing Cypher had always been Squall's fight.
You've upgraded your blade,
Cypher admired.
I like the new design. You've still got that thing with that monster of yours though. Suitable, considering you are a monster.
Squall didn't bother to correct him about the lion. He raised his punishment, glaring at Cypher over the blade of it. His own quiet, seething anger was in direct contrast with Cypher's wild fury. The two of them were so similar, yet so different.
Hope you've actually improved since last time,
Squall mocked.
My sorceress has given me power you can't imagine,
Cypher grinned evilly. They both moved at the same time. So fast that Rinoa didn't actually see who struck first. The loud clanging of metal on metal echoed loudly in the room. Rinoa had been watching Squall fight for a while now. Both on the field and in training. She had always considered him to be incredible. Fast, smooth, elegant, and deadly. But she had never, until this moment, truly seen him fight before. Against another gunblade master, in fight where both men were intimately familiar with how the other fought, he moved like a god. So fast she had trouble keeping up with him. Focused and still so damn beautiful. The only reason she knew they were even hitting each other was the deafening clash of metal that seemed to echo a second after they actually met. The part of her that wanted to help was frozen in place by the part of her brain that told her Squall was on a completely different level than herself. She had always known that, but it was a totally heart-racing thing to actually see it.
Damn!
Selphie breathed in awe. Rinoa couldn't take her eyes off of them to look over to her, but she still heard it. Then Selphie had never seen Squall like this before either.
It's been a while since I've seen him really fight,
Quistis whispered, as though afraid of distracting him. As if anything could break his concentration in this moment.
I don't think I've ever seen him like this,
Zell murmured. Cypher wouldn't mind constantly fighting for an audience. Squall did though. He had made it a rule that if Cypher was going to train with him, they would do it away from public eye. It was one of the few standoffs Squall ever won outright because Cypher didn't have anyone else to fight. It was either obey that condition, or be left wanting for training partners. So very few people were actually privy to how Squall looked when he was giving it his all.
Hein?
Irvine shuddered. He had actually tried to fight him once. Squall and Cypher were back into their old, familiar rhythms. It felt faster now. There was less time to think between each incoming blow. Squall moved quicker from experience. Cypher had lost a lot of that showmanship that had weighed him down. What had once been a deadly dance was now raw energy and simple focus. They weren't trying to show off or one-up. This was a straightforward contest of life and death. Victory and defeat. Honor and disgrace. These things went hand in hand. Two sides of the same coin. Not unlike Squall and Cypher. One clash of blades brought their faces together between the crossed swords. Cypher was trying to grin through the effort on his face. Squall's teeth were bared, his brows furrowed. Both men's arms were shaking with the force they were applying to the other.
Same old moves, Squall,
Cypher mocked, returning an insult once given to him.
I can't say the same. Apparently, someone finally taught you how to fight without dancing.
Cypher growled at him. He kicked out. Squall dodged the blow and turned, catching Cypher's next slash against his revolver. He drew back his fist and slammed it forward. The explosion of ice from his hand against Cypher's cheek created a flurry of snow around them. Cypher fell back, flipped over, and came back on his feet. His lip was bleeding. His breath was frosting in the air. Squall's fist tightened, cracking the ice coating the leather.
Don't make me kill you, Cypher,
Squall told him, his voice as cold as the snow floating around his face.
Lay down your weapon now and, for the sake of our past, I'll spare your life. If you keep fighting me, I won't hold back.
Chuckling, Cypher tossed back his head.
Ooh, scary. I think you've been too long without me, Squall.
Squall's eyebrow raised curiously.
You've forgotten what a challenge is. I'm the only one who can conquer you. You've been trapped with weaklings that offer you no real resistance. That's okay. I'll remind you what it's like when you're truly fighting a worthy opponent. I'll show you the power my sorceress has given me.
The fire spell was so quickly cast that Squall didn't see it coming. Cypher knew that he was weak against that element. It hit his body painfully, causing Shiva to cry out in pain. Smoke and ash floated down about him as Cypher twisted his blade. The green energy glowed along the blade. Cypher took one slow step, then sprinted. Cypher moved so fast that the air rushed around him. Spinning his Hyperion around in short, fast circles, he intended on slicing through Squall like a piece of meat. Using magic his mistress had given him, he became a tornado of blades. Demon Slice. Squall gritted his teeth against the wind and the pain of the fire that was already fading. He brought up his punishment and gritted his teeth. Squall. Rinoa took an instinctive step forward as Squall vanished into the wind and magic that Cypher had summoned. She truly lost sight of both of them and heard only grunts and the clashing of metal echoing from inside. What was going on? Was he okay? One particularly loud clang rang out. The tornado suddenly stopped, and as the air calmed it showed both men still standing. Cypher jerked against his Hyperion. The gun blade was locked between the twin blades of Squall's punishment. Squall had twisted them so that Cypher was unable to pull his Hyperion free. There was a long gash along Squall's arm that was sluggishly bleeding, but he didn't appear to be any worse for wear. Cypher glared, trying harder to escape. Squall's eyes flashed darkly as ice began wrapping around the punishment. The facets of it began capturing the lights in the room. Reflecting, refracting, magnifying. The power of the energy beam was painful, and Cypher was caught right in the worst part of it. Squall lowered the punishment, forcing Cypher to lower down because he wouldn't release Hyperion. Ice and light and raw energy. Blast zone. Cypher cried out as the ice shattered and the energy of the light exploded outward. He was thrown backward. The energy ripped through his clothing, burned his skin. His back slammed against the ground, his head bounced down, the Hyperion skidded from his hands. The light faded and Cypher's body was smoking. Squall twisted the punishment in his hands, watching Cypher carefully to see if he would stand. He was totally still. Squall. Rinoa rushed towards him, skirting around Cypher's body without looking back at him. She skidded to a halt beside him, raising her hands and hesitating over the slash on his arm. The bleeding had completely stopped, but she still worried over him. One of the things that Squall appreciated about her. The others walked forward more slowly. They weren't looking at Squall or Cypher though. They were staring at Edia, still reclining at her ease. As though she sensed their gazes on her, her eyes finally opened. Slowly, like she was being gently roused from sleep. She looked from Cypher's prone form then up to them. She sneered as she got to her feet.
Worthless child!
All of the seeds flinched, grabbing for their weapons. Edia didn't even look at them. She raised her hands. The floor under her feet started rippling like water and she began sinking down. Squall ran forward but too late. The top of Edia's headpiece disappeared under the floor and she was gone.
Where did she go?
Zell asked, turning his head.
The auditorium is below this,
Irvine told them.
If we hurry, we can catch her. All right, go.
Squall pointed to the elevator. None of them spared Cypher a glance as they ran for it. They didn't see his eyes squint open and glare at Squall's back as he followed Rinoa into the elevator. The seeds worked their way quickly down through the halls and towards the auditorium. It was a large room filled with long rows of short seats all facing a large podium set high above it all. Hollow screens were flickering on the ceiling, showing blueprints of Balam Garden and outlining the plan of attack for the soldiers who had last been here.
Where is she?
Squall asked, turning his head about as he ran inside. Rinoa was right behind him, frowning as the others spread out. Squall turned about, confused. What was up with this energy in the air? It almost felt cold. And Squall didn't feel cold. It tickled along his skin, unnerving him.
I don't like this.
Selphie frowned, turning about. Her knuckles tight on her crescent wish.
Yeah,
Irvine agreed.
Do you think she escaped?
It sounded like the loud thudding of a heartbeat from directly above them. Squall turned quickly, brandishing his punishment. The hollow screen shattered as if it were made of glass. Down from the ceiling, her body twisting almost unnaturally in the air, Edia fell gracefully down. She flipped over, her momentum stopping just before her feet touched down. The light clicking of her heels echoed loudly in the empty auditorium as she stood before the podium. She looked down at them all with a sneer of disgust on her lovely face. Now that he knew what he was looking at, Squall couldn't stop his old, foggy memories from overlaying this woman onto the kind one that had raised him. They were exactly the same and couldn't have possibly been more different.
So?
Edia rolled her head lazily, looking down on them.
The time has come. You're the legendary seed destined to face me.
Squall's eye twitched. Their people went talking about his destiny again. He didn't know that destiny had anything to do with it. No matter the reason, he was here now. He stepped forward, lowering his punishment towards her. She grinned and the smile was almost like that of matrons. The images, the feeling attached to them, clashed in his mind.
I must say that I am impressed,
she praised sweetly. Her voice soured again.
An impressive nuisance. Your life ends here, Seed. Squall, careful with that. I don't want you to drop it and break it. You could hurt yourself.
Slow, unsteady footsteps echoed in the room as Cypher limped up to the podium. He looked a little worse for wear from their battle. Why wouldn't he just stay down already? Edia sneered at him.
Worthless fool. I love you all equally. You may not be mine by blood, but you're all still mine.
Who was this woman? This wasn't their matron. No matter that she looked like her, that she carried her face, this was not matron.
All seeds must perish.
Edia threw out her arms, reveling in the declaration.
Be strong, Squall. Grow into a great man. I know you'll make me proud.
Cypher growled as he threw himself over the raised podium. He landed a little awkwardly but stood up on his own. He glared at Squall, nearly doubled over in pain from his injuries.
I'm the sorceress's knight. You'll never get past me. Cypher, stay down,
Squall growled at him.
I don't want to kill you.
Squall hated him. He resented him. But, for better or worse, Cypher was part of the family. The black sheep, but still family. Squall would rather not run him through. But he would if he had to. Sorceress Edia stepped over the small bump that acted as a rail for the high podium. Her body gently floated down, her heels clicking on the ground. She landed behind Cypher, continuing to use him as her human shield. One of her own children.
I can't afford to lose,
Cypher stated almost like he was going mad. A mad dog, Too injured to fight. Too mad to stop fighting.
Cypher.
Rinoa's soft voice was filled with sadness. Squall saw her lifting her rising sun out of the corner of his eye.
You could have been great.
The tick of the release of the blaster was too loud in this room. Cypher tried to lift Hyperion to catch it but didn't move fast enough. He cried out in pain as the serrated blade of the circular sun sliced down across his chest. Blood spurted forth and he collapsed back as Rinoa caught the edge neatly. He was no challenge in his current state.
Damn!
He murmured, staring up at the ceiling. His body wasn't obeying. Why was his body refusing to obey? Just get up. You'll lose the dreams. You'll lose the peace. His trembling body didn't move from the floor and the seeds began surrounding Edia on all sides. A circle of her children, all brandishing weapons at her with the sort of hardness in their eyes that only came from a lifetime of mercenary training.
Defeated,
Edia growled at Cypher's downed body.
Useless fool. Enough play. Seeds must die.
The blast of energy that erupted from her body was formless and shapeless. Pure energy, the sort of magic only a sorceress could cast. Everyone cried out but stood their ground as it slammed into their bodies.
Take her out.
Squall ordered viciously.
Matron, why am I so different? Dark Messenger.
Rinoa cast first. The force of gravity crashed down upon Edia. She growled as her body fought against it. As it was wearing off, Rinoa raised her sun and took the shot. The blade flew true and was knocked off course by Edia's claws.
You're not different, Squall. Hi-ya!
Selfie leapt forward. Her wish was a blur as she whipped it around her head and body. It was easily knocked aside by Edia, but the speed which she had to do so took her eyes off of the others, giving them their chance.
I am different. Everyone else has parents and a home. Why don't I?
Irvine lined up the shot. The new AP ammo freshly crafted just this morning was hot in the chamber, waiting to be released. It did so with an electric punch of thunder. Edia cried out as the bullets slammed into her back, transmitting the magical energy. Selfie's wish smacked into her side. Zell cried out as he ran forward into the fray.
You have me. And Sid. And Elle. We're your family.
Zell's fist slammed with a burst of fire into Edia's hand. She caught the blow, absorbed the energy, then turned and tossed Zell away like trash. He slammed into Selfie and the two of them crashed down to the ground. Quistis jumped forward to take their place, whipping her tail around. The sharp bite of its brass tip struck hard against her claws.
But where is my home? Why don't I have one like the others? Why? Why am I here?
Squall charged forward. Rinoa's recall mechanism on her blaster caught the edge and she took aim again, pausing when she saw Squall enter her frame of view. He sliced the punishment up and, glowering darkly at him, Edia caught the edge of it in her claws. The two of them glared at each other over the shine of the dark blade.
Oh, Squall. Baby, listen to me. Those people weren't your family. Die, Seed.
Edia's magic slammed into Squall's gut. He cried out as he was thrown backwards. He hadn't even landed before Shiva had a cura spell into his body. He caught himself on his hand, flipping over, and skidding to a halt on his feet. Quistis jerked her whip up, wrapping it around Edia's hand. She pulled back, upsetting her balance. The witch's hand glowed with fizzling ice magic as she took aim at her.
No, you don't.
Fists burning, Zell slammed into her side. Both fists landed true. One against her hip, the other on her ribs. Edia fell back, wincing in pain. The darkness in her eyes didn't fade. But the glow in Zell's hand told them he had trapped something inside an Odin capsule from Edia's body. He grinned as he bounced it in his palm.
Christy said. She said she looked up my name in her book. She said squall means storm. A storm that destroys everything. Is that what I am? Silence!
Selphie yelled, calling partially on Siren's power. The spell she threw out was strong, glowing vibrantly in the air. Edia dropped her shoulder, dodging neatly. Rinoa's cry of surprise was cut off when the spell hit her, stealing her ability to cast magic.
Oh, shit!
Selphie flinched.
Rinoa, I'm sorry. I got this.
Irvine reached into one of his many pockets.
G-Garden students are always prepared with your non-magical needs. Here, Rinoa. Drink this.
Edia was twisting back and forth, taking turns dodging and blocking both Quistis and Squall's attacks at the same time. Her body was a blur, her black skirt flaring up around her legs. She didn't miss a single step.
No. Squall, no. You listen to me. Those people were wrong. They were wrong for giving you that name. Nothing that happened was your fault.
Edia cried out, throwing her magic. The blizzard spell, in so much more control in her hands than Squall's had ever been, chased Quistis down. She cried out, trying to dodge. She couldn't prevent the ice from catching her ankle. She screamed in pain when it not only froze her leg but seemed to sap all of the warmth from the limb entirely.
Close your eyes!
Zell yelled. He threw a punch, threw a fire spell. It crashed against the ice, shattering it. The powers negated each other and Quistis reached for her leg with trembling hands. It had only been a few seconds, but it already felt numb and dead.
Over here!
Rinoa yelled, shooting her sun to catch Edia's attention. The sorceress caught the sun in mid-air. She lowered it, growling in anger. She clenched her fist and the metal groaned before shattering in her hand. Rinoa cried out in despair and loss. It almost felt like Edia had removed her arm.
I am your family, Squall. I love you so much, my sweet boy.
Squall sliced wide, going for her abdomen. Edia dropped back. Her magic retaliated and Squall felt like he had been punched in the face though nothing had touched him. Jaw now sore, he charged in again. Irvine's shotgun blasts echoed around him, peppering Edia with ammo coated with thunder magic.
Quistis!
Selphie dropped down beside her.
Cura! I already tried,
Quistis groaned through clenched teeth.
Irvine! Give me a potion. I just need something to take the pain away. On it.
Irvine jerked back his wrist, opening the barrel of the shotgun. The empty shells fell out and he reached into his pocket. He pulled out first a bottle that he threw over to Selphie. She caught it deftly in the air as Irvine was reloading his gun.
But you're not my real mother. Are you, matron?
Squall charged Edia down, bringing down his punishment. Edia caught it on the claws of her gloves and jerked him in closer, giving him a great view of her face. Once so serene and beautiful, now filled with hatred and malice.
Worthless seed,
she growled softly into his face.
You are nothing more than a boy, pretending to be a man. A lowering storm that will only destroy everything in your path. What makes you any better than me, mercenary? Bloodbringer. At least I fight for myself. When can you say you've ever lifted your sword for your own beliefs? Believe this.
Squall's finger tightened on the trigger. The explosion of ice in the bullet created a spire to the ceiling. It also created a cloud of ice crystals from the revolver that shattered all over Edia's face, blinding her temporarily. Squall kicked out, planting his boot into her gut. Edia let out a grunt of pain as she fell back. Squall jerked his gun blade up, slicing across her shoulder. Blood, hot and red, burst forth from the wound and Edia screamed.
No. I'm not your real mother. But...
Squall brought the butt of the gun back around. The reverberation of the force up his arm as the pommel slammed into her temple made him grit his teeth. Edia dropped down, the bells on her headpiece twinkling merrily.
I love you as a mother does.
The leather of Squall's glove protested as he reached down and grabbed the front of her dress. He lifted Edia bodily from the ground. Wham! Squall drew back his fist and pulled up for another blow. Wham! Wham! Nose bleeding, Edia lifted her claws and placed them against Squall's chest. He reacted too slow and the blast of energy sent him flying. He landed on his back, skidding away from her. Edia got to her feet then continued going up, her body floating in the air.
She's getting away!
Irvine yelled, letting off 3 quick shots. Edia caught them easily as her body continued its ascent, beginning to pass the podium. Squall jumped to his feet and ran for the seating. He ran up the short steps and around, following the curve of the room to the podium stairs. Squall landed and drew back his sword, ice coating the blade as he prepared to throw it.
I will always love you, Squall. I will always be your mother.
He hesitated. Squall's teeth gnashed together as his arm refused to move.
Really? Promise. You and I are family, Squall. And we always will be.
Matron.
Squall, what are you doing?
Rinoa asked, running towards him, looking between him and the escaping sorceress.
Damn!
Squall's entire body jerked forward as he threw his gun blade. It slipped from his hands, spinning in the air. The lion pendant gleamed in the low light. Edia turned, pulling up her hand to catch it with her shield. Too late. The twin blades of the punishment slid easily into her chest. Edia froze in midair, her hand still outstretched as the lion pendant swung about to a halt. The room stopped. Edia's eyes looked down as the gleaming ice melted away. It was magical, it was Edia's own affinity, it did not harm her. But the sharp steel of the blade. Edia coughed once, blood coating her lips. Squall reached into his coat and pulled out his inventory. The quick release function deposited the last thing he had placed inside into the palm of his hand. With a loud hissing, a purple, noxious-looking gas burst forth from Edia's wound. From her blood. Her body dropped slamming into the podium. The others cried out and dropped back out of instinct of what that gas could be. Squall drew back his hand again. The bright red and gold feather in his hand, slightly warm and pulsing with life, flew straight like an arrow. He didn't wait to see if it had worked. He jumped from the platform stairs and started running. He called out for the others to get away. A second later, the white light flashed. A familiar, strangely confining weightlessness fell over Squall's body as he dropped to the floor. It took him a moment to recognize the paralyzing action that had froze him similarly way back in Timber TV. But it was different. His body hit the ground ungracefully. He couldn't move. But this time, he could see. Like the room was full of two bright lights, it was reflecting painfully in his eyes. He had landed near Cypher's still body, but the light was so harsh he could barely see his face. Squall wanted to shade his eyes, to stand up. His body was locked in place like it wasn't even his to control. What was going? What just happened? Had he messed up? He hadn't meant to do more damage, he just couldn't stand seeing the woman who raised him die. Soft footsteps, almost weightless, echoed in the loud room. He didn't recognize them because Rinoa had never walked like that before. Until she stepped into view, moving strangely and awkwardly, he didn't even think of it as her. Rinoa. She dropped down beside Cypher. She paused. Then, gently, lovingly, she reached out and picked up Sapphire's downed body. She cradled him in the crook of her elbow. One hand to his chest. She leaned over him and her hair fell, obscuring Squall's vision. She bent lower. Squall could do nothing but stare as she kissed him. Rinoa. Cypher. What? Squall's body locked down as he watched Rinoa gently press her sweet kiss against Cypher. Helpless to do anything as she lovingly moved her lips over his. Rinoa leaned back again as Cypher got slowly to his feet. His injuries were gone. Not healing, just gone. Like they had never existed. He started walking away as though he were in his own trance. Rinoa watched him go, still for a single moment. The light flashed. Rinoa dropped. Just like that, the spell holding him in place was gone. Groaning, Squall lifted himself back up. He had hit his head when he landed and his ears were ringing. It was hard to maintain his balance even on all fours. Rinoa. Quistis, limping from the ice, moved over to her first. Grimacing, she lowered herself down and reached for the supine girl.
Are you all right?
Squall. Everyone froze. Then their heads all turned slowly. Because that voice. That sweet, caring voice. Edia lifted her torso slowly from the podium. Squall's punishment clanged to the ground noisily. The hole in her dress was wide and open, but the wound was gone.
Quistis.
Edia's eyes focused on her as her eyes filled with tears.
Selfie. Irvine. Zell.
The five of them turned to her slowly. Barely starting to rise. Not daring to believe. Because that didn't sound like Sorceress Edia. That sounded just like their loving matron. Tears fell freely down her face as Edia beheld them all.
You've all grown. So much. And you've become so strong.
Slowly, still wincing, Edia pushed herself up. Dried blood stained her gown, but her death blow was completely healed. Golden sparkles still lingered around the area. The soft glow, the only remainder of the phoenix pinion Squall had thrown at the last moment just as she died.
I have waited for this day to come,
Edia said, leaning back as her heartbreak showed on her face for the first time.
I have feared this day would come. Is today a joyous day? Or an odious day?
She looked down at them all. Her precious children. So long she had been separated from them, but she still knew them all by name and face. She could still see their small selves smiling up at her through wide-eyed, grown faces.
Where is Elone?
She asked them desperately.
Have I protected Elone?
What? Squall didn't understand. Who was this woman?
Squall.
He looked down again at Quistis. She was holding on to Rinoa, her eyes wide with fear.
It's Rinoa.
Rinoa? What's wrong with Rinoa? End of chapter.